a Dish by RMU Culinary, a weekly installment where we show you delicious food. I'm Chef Rachel with the Institute of Culinary Arts at Robert Morris University in downtown Chicago. This week on Dish, we're going to make strawberry shortcake. So what we are going to start with is our biscuits, because they're going to take some time to chill in the refrigerator before we can start assembling everything. So what I have is flour. I'm going to add to that baking powder, sugar, and salt. And then what we're going to do is actually sift these ingredients together so that way they become a little bit lighter as we continue to work with our bread. So the key part to this is making sure that you take your dough once it's done and have time for it to chill. It has a lot of butter in there, so you want to make sure that butter stays together. As you continue working with it, it's not going to melt into the biscuit dough. So once we get all of this through, and all this is going to do is add a little bit of air in there and make sure all of our ingredients aren't lumped together. I'm going to add this back into the bowl just so I can mix it a little bit easier for right now. And the first thing we're going to do is cut in our butter. So cutting in our butter, you can have a couple different utensils if you want to use that to help break your butter down, or use a fork, similar to doing like a pie crust. I have my cubed butter. It is also chilled, so you want to make sure that your butter is cold as you're working it in, because if it is warm, it will just kind of mix into the dough and create one smooth batter instead of keeping those butter pieces in there, which helps to create those flaky layers that you want in your biscuit. So what I'm going to do is just kind of break it in. I like doing this by hand. You can do it in a mixer or a food processor. I just can usually tell where the butter's at a little bit easier and how big those chunks are. So what we're looking for is the butter is going to be in smaller pieces and be a little bit smaller than pea size as we break it into the dough. So you want to make sure you kind of do this a little bit quicker. You want to keep that butter cold as it goes in. Because we also have milk that we're going to add in afterwards. So I try and keep the pieces a little bit bigger on this stage because we are going to keep mixing afterwards. So I don't want to have it too small of pieces where it's really fine, and then I add the milk in, and then all of a sudden I have no butter pieces left in the dough. So this is just about ready. So you can see I have pieces of butter in here that are pretty small. You don't want to go too small on this first part because you will continue working and warming the butter as you go. So what I'm going to do is add my cold milk in. And I'm just going to mix this until it combines. You don't want to really overwork it too much, because what's going to happen is the gluten's going to form in the dough, so gluten is found in flour. If you keep working it, that's how your dough gets really tight, and sometimes you'll see that the dough will pull back really tightly together. So you want to make sure you don't go too far on that. You don't want to keep messing with the dough too much, and it needs those rest periods. So once this comes together, it's still going to be a little bit shaggy looking, but most of the dough will come together. We're going to stick it in the refrigerator for probably about 15 or 20 minutes, just so everything kind of sets in the dough. The flavor will develop a little bit more, and it'll allow the butter to chill back again. Once this chills, we're going to start cutting our biscuits. So I'm going to wrap this in plastic wrap, and we'll start cutting our biscuit dough. So we have our chilled dough that I wrapped in plastic wrap. What we're going to do is take this out. You can put a little bit of flour down. This tends to be a pretty good dough recipe where it doesn't stick to the countertop all too much. So what I'm going to do is you can take a rolling pin. I like to just press it down a little bit because it doesn't work the dough quite as much. And I'm looking for about a ½ inch in thickness. If you put this too thin and then you go through and cut your dough to bake it, if you have it like a ½ inch thickness, it's only going to maybe double in size. So you want to make sure it's a little bit thicker so you get your taller biscuit as you go and press out the dough the rest of the way. And then I have these round cutters. You can use any kind of cutter that you want to do. You can cut it into squares, whatever's easiest for you to pop out your dough. And I'm just going to press it straight down. If you press it down and then you twist your cutter, usually it twists the dough, so as it bakes, it kind of goes a little sideways. So you just want to make sure you get it straight down. And you want to do it as close together as possible. So as I'm doing this, I'm trying to utilize as much dough and the space that I have there, so that way I'm not wasting too much space, and that way I can get as many biscuits as possible. You can take this dough after you've done your first round of cutting out biscuits. You can take it and repress the dough together, usually after about the second, maybe the third time, depending on how much work you've put into the dough. It does start to get a little bit tough and it doesn't hold as well. It starts getting a little misshapen. So I would really say you can press this all back together another time or two just to get a few more biscuits out of here. You can always take the dough at this point and freeze it and pull it out and bake it whenever you have extra time. You want to have it just on the side and you think about it last minute, so that way you have things ready to go. But this is all you would need to do to press your dough back together. And you can keep cutting more pieces out. So I have this half sheet pan. I'm going to toss that into the oven, which is at 350 degrees. I'm going to let it bake. It'll probably take about a good 10 minutes or so for the dough to cook completely through. Once it comes out, you need to make sure that it cools completely. It's going to be a nice golden brown color, but once you start assembling, you want to make sure that the biscuits are cooled before you start adding the strawberries and the whipped cream and everything in there, because it will start to melt the whipped cream as it goes. So this is going to go straight into the oven. And then what we're going to do is start to make our whipped cream and our strawberries. So for our strawberries, just have a couple here to show you how to do this part of it, is that I'm going to take some sugar, so it's about 4 tablespoons of sugar, and then I'm going to slice up some strawberries really fast. So this, you're just taking your strawberries and sweetening it a little bit. Depends on the batch that you might have. It might be a little bit sweeter, it might be a little bit more tart. But I'm just chopping it down so as it goes in half, and then just cut it in thinner slices all the way through, so that way it's a little bit easier to eat. So what's going to happen is, as the strawberries sit, it's going to start to pull out some of the liquid in there, and it's going to absorb some of the sugar, so it's a little bit sweeter. And that way it'll balance our biscuits off very nicely. So I'm going to take this, just toss it together a little bit, and I'm going to set these off to the side as we make our whipped cream. So the last component is going to make whipped cream. This is really versatile for a lot of different desserts. So what we're going to do first is we're going to add our heavy whipping cream in. You want to make sure this is cold as you're using it. Whipped cream is always better when it's cold. Once it gets warm, it's not able to whip up as much. So you just want to be very cautious with this. You can do this by hand as well. It takes a little bit longer. So I have the whip in here. I'm going to turn this on. It's going to be about a medium speed. As I'm going to let this whip up. You want to go at a higher speed, so that way the cream doesn't warm up as you're whipping, and that way it has a greater volume faster. So once it starts to get a little bit of a peak to it, I'm going to add my powdered sugar in there to add some sweetness. You don't want to forget to add this into your whipped cream. And so what you're looking for in your end result is that it's about a medium peak. So that's going to kind of look like the Hershey Kiss. When you get the Hershey Kiss candies in there, it kind of has the top and it just folds over. You don't want to over whip it too much. If you do over whip your heavy cream as you're making whipped cream, you are going to get like really chunky pieces that are in there. So you want to make sure as you're whipping it, you're paying attention. Don't walk away, don't answer the phone, kind of see what's going on in your bowl, just to make sure that it doesn't go too far. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this down a little bit. I'm going to add my powdered sugar in. And then let this mix on high speed until I get the peaks that I want to get. The last thing we're going to add in here is vanilla extract. If you want to change this out for other whipped cream recipes, either for other desserts, you can add in cinnamon or other extracts to flavor it differently in there. It's really up to you, but you just need really a couple teaspoons at most of whatever you're adding in, and it should be enough flavor in your whipped cream as you're making it. All right, so we have our whipped cream is ready to go. It's at the medium peak I'm looking for, so I can take this and kind of check it, and as you lift it up, you can see how it kind of just peaks over a little bit. So once this is done, I am going to start assembling my strawberry shortcake. So we're just about at the end. What I have are my biscuits that are cooled already. You can see it has a nice little golden color just on the top, and the bottoms will get golden, but it's not going to be completely all the way across. So I'm going to just choose a couple of these to put on the plate. What we're going to do is I'm going to take a serrated knife, or the bread knife, to cut them in half. So I'm going to put the bottoms onto the plate. The next thing we'll add is a little bit of our strawberries on top. So our strawberries have been sitting for a couple minutes. All I'm going to do is just take a little bit of them and put them on the base of the biscuit. What you can do too with your strawberries is you can add in mint or basil and do some herbs in there just to add a little bit of a different flavor. This one's pretty straightforward of a strawberry shortcake, but you can always add your own variation into it just to add a little something different. And then our last step is going to be putting just a little bit of whipped cream on top. So I'm going to take some of my whipped cream, put it into my piping bag, and just do a little bit on top to balance everything out. All right, and that is our strawberry shortcakes. So for more recipes and information about our programs, please visit robertmorris.edu/dish or subscribe to our YouTube channel.